Greetings, fellow songwriters and seekers, and welcome back to Muse and Measure. If you haven't done so yet, please click that little subscribe button down below. Well, I've been on a little hiatus. I had a bad cold, and I've got this stupid frozen shoulder, which I think I got writing string parts. And I'm going to show you in a video coming up about how I demo and spend hours and hours on string parts. But I think what I did was I was leaning to my right side for hours and hours and hours and caused this frozen shoulder, which now is affecting my sleep and my overall well-being. So if I seem haggard and grayer than normal, that is why. And stupider than normal, that is why. Hopefully I won't be too stupid today though. But anyways, welcome back to Muse and Measure. Happy to have you here. So Cynthia from Toledo has asked, when should I use diminished chords in my songs? I really love this question because I really like using diminished chords when I can in songs, and they really add a lot, especially to chord progressions. So the short of it is that you use diminished chords to spice things up and to emphasize intense moments in a song. And I'll get to both of those. But let's start out with what is a diminished chord. So the way I teach it in my class is there's my frozen shoulder again, giving me trouble. So if I have a C major chord and I flatten the third of the chord, which is E, I turn it into E flat, that turns it to minor. So that changes the motion already. And the kind of cliche idea about these chords is that major is happy and light and minor is heavy and sad, cold. Major is warm. Now, if I alter this even more, I'm going to flatten the fifth of the chord as well as the third. I get what's called a diminished chord. And what's really cool about this is that I can also add a seventh to it and make it even more diminished. So the structure of a diminished chord it's based on all minor thirds. So between the root and the third is a minor third. Between the third and the fifth is a minor third interval. And if you add a seventh, if it's a full diminished, that will also be a minor third. Well, what gives it its kind of dissonant quality is that every other note, when paired together, creates a tritone. So not between the root and the third, but between the root and the fifth, there is a tritone. So in this case, it would be C and G flat. Very dissonant harmony. Also between a third and the seventh, that would be another tritone. And then, from the fifth to the first, back again. But those are the same notes. So it creates this tritone stack, which makes it all the more dissonant. In fact, the tritone, it was seen in traditional music, especially in the medieval and Renaissance times, as being the devil in music. It was something that was banned by the church. And this is what Jimi Hendrix starts Purple Haze with. Okay, so that super dissonance creates all this tension. And what does tension do for us in music and in stories? It makes us expect and also long for some kind of resolution. So if something is dissonant and harsh, we expect it to go to something nice. And so we can use that expectation and use that tension in our chord progressions, especially when they're a little bit boring. So say I have a simple chord progression like going from F to G minor, maybe I go up to A minor as well. Well, if I want to spice that up and make a little bit more tension, a little more drama in it, I can put a diminished chord in between each one. So between F and G minor, I can go F sharp diminished, and then to G minor, that's consonant, and then go dissonant again with an G sharp diminished, and then to A minor. So that's a cool way to spice things up. And, you find this harmony beginning in Bach, using these kind of dissonant harmonies a little bit to add this really cool color and flavor. And Bach, is the master of, the classical music tradition, even though he's Baroque. We call the whole of Western art music classical music for some reason, even though it's a specific period. And I would say that the masters of songwriting and composition for rock and roll and folk singing would be the Beatles. So, and there's many others, but that's kind of the go-to thing. So there's the song that Paul McCartney did, which you all know and love, called Blackbird, which is actually based, inspired by a Bach piece that he and George Harrison had learned in their school days. And so it starts out with all consonant harmonies. So it's the 1, 2, 1 again in first inversion, and then back to the 1 in octave form. But then it goes to the 4, and then we get our first diminished chord, C sharp diminished, 5, and then another diminished chord. So it's really adds some really cool movement. Okay, it gives us this kind of sense of chromaticism. So the bass line can move chromatically up, right? And that kind of chromaticism really is cool, and it adds a lot of tension, and it's just seductive and luring us in, and it just keeps the movement of the line keep going. So it's much more satisfying than just walking up whole steps. It's especially if you're going to land on something. Okay, so it just builds this tension with all that dissonance that we expect something to resolve at the end. It's going to land on something that is beautiful and resolute, and all the world's going to be made whole again. So that's really cool about the dissonant chord of the diminished chord. And this was used back in the early days of silent film, back when they didn't have a soundtrack that was synced with the movie. No, dialogue was synced. You had the little cards that came up that told you what the characters were saying, and but the emotion of it came through the guy who was playing piano in the movie theater. And there's those cliche scenes where like a villain will capture some woman, and for some reason they don't like to kill women in the traditional way by shooting them or stabbing them or strangling them. They like to tie them to railroad tracks. And so in those scenes, we can take a look at one, you often have the piano player hitting a dissonant chord and staying on it, a diminished chord. Okay, because it puts us on our edge of the seat. We feel like something's about to happen, and it's not something pleasant. It's always this fear. Of course, we are kind of adapted to expect the worst. If we have this unsettling feeling, we're not certain what's going to happen. And this is really what kind of the story arc and Hollywood films are based on, is that's the climax of a film, is when we don't know what's going to happen. And so that diminished chord was used a lot in old-timey silent film accompaniment by pianists. So the other way to use diminished chords, I think, is when you want to do, often like, just like that movie example is, you want to dramatize things, and you want to give a chord that gives that feeling of unsettledness. Okay. And so, just by way of example, I have this song called Born Sick and Commanded Well. And the pre-chorus, or I guess the pre-hook goes, I don't know why I compromised living in this hell. Born sick and commanded well. Okay, so when I got to that word hell, I thought it was pretty boring to go back to the 4 chord. So it goes 4, 5, 1, 4, and then 1, 5, 1. So I wanted something to spice it up, but also when I hit that word hell, that chord does not sound like hell. It sounds like a little bit of heaven, a little slice of heaven there in that chord. So I wanted something that was much more interesting, and the go-to chord then would be a diminished. So I went instead to this diminished 7th, a C sharp diminished 7th. Okay, so instead it sounds like this. Don't know why I compromised to living in this hell. And then when it resolves, it's all the more satisfying. Because if I did, don't know why I compromised living in this hell. Bone sick. It's just too sweet. It's like a hymnal or something. So having that dissonance and that diminished chord really helps kind of dramatize that word. So if you have a song lyric that calls for that, you might ask yourself, okay, I'm saying something that's really unsettling here, or something that's kind of unnerving. Maybe a diminished chord will do it. You have to be careful, of course. You don't want to be too heavy-handed with stuff. Maybe a minor chord would do it, but a diminished chord really helps to drive home that feeling of unsettledness. Okay. Well, I hope that helps. What I recommend you do is, if you're in the songwriting process and you have a chord progression that's just kind of, it's not really exciting for you, and you want to spice it up a little bit, try throwing some diminished chords in between to help with that transition between the chords. And then use it in that sense of madrigalism that we've talked about in previous videos, where you can dramatize what's going on in the lyrics with a chord. And this is the chord of being unsettled, of being unnerved, of being on the edge of your seat. You don't know what's happened. It's the ultimate tension. So if there's something going on in your lyrics that require that emotion, you have it. Okay? So you got major for happy, minor for sad, and all those different gradations of those emotions. But you've got the diminished chord for that other unsettled feeling that we don't want to feel too often in our real lives anyways. We love feeling it when we're in a movie theater or watching a show or reading a book. All right, well, I hope that's helpful. And if you have any other questions, please put it down in the comments, or send me an email at tyler@musemeasure.com. Until next time, best of luck with your songwriting and your spiritual practice. Take care.